Testimonies are not about us, they're for other people to give God glory. And so this is mine. I was saved when I was 10, and I tell people I was saved, believed in God, was following Him, obviously not to the best of my abilities, like many of us, but I was not surrendered. And there's a huge difference. It's one thing to say that Jesus is our Savior, but it's another to say and fully embody the fact that He is our Lord. We hear the songs, we sing the hymns and the gospel songs. My life is not my own, to you I belong. But oftentimes we don't live that way. And I was guilty. So at the end of every year, I usually do 75 hard, 75 soft, some version of that. I never finish it, but every year for the last couple of years, I've gone into it. I have my goals for how much water I want to drink, how much I want to exercise, the foods I'm eating or not eating, how much alcohol I'm drinking or not drinking. But I've also tried to be better about reading the Bible on a daily basis. And up until that point, I would read devotionals, I would share them with my friends, we'd read them together, but I wasn't consistent. And that was one thing in end of November of 2024, where when I went into the month of December, I said, okay, for 75 days straight, I want to read the Bible every day. Let's back it up a little bit. There's one major thing I want to talk about in this video, but the overall theme, the overarching theme is surrender and obedience. Because at the end of the day, if He's not just our Savior, but our Lord, that means we follow Him. We know His voice. He orders our steps and we follow. Okay, so let's get into the story. November 12th, 2017, I became a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. It was something I had longed for and desired, honestly, since I was a child. I have family members who are members. I have family members who are members of other organizations. This was something I grew up seeing. It was something I saw on television. We've seen it in a different world. I remember my first time ever seeing it was on an episode of Sister Sister. And it was something I knew I wanted to do. I had seen the fundraisers. I was a debutante. I was exposed to this from a younger age. And even now at this moment, I still say, I did this for the right reasons. I did it to serve. And I joined in college, my junior year of college. And I think one thing that So I joined in my junior year of college. I was an active member both my junior year and my senior year. I went on to join a graduate chapter in the state of Louisiana, and then I went on to join one in my hometown in Virginia years later. So this was something that I was invested in. And they tell you, and you hear it, this is a lifetime commitment. I was aware of that. I loved being a member. I loved being able to make that impact in my community, the sisterhood, the friendships that came from it. But, I didn't realize that there was more. A couple of years ago, and you're seeing it just like you're seeing this video, more and more people started to come and share testimonies about leaving, denouncing their organizations. I didn't know what that word meant. Didn't know, had never heard of it. And people were leaving. And I was puzzled, like, well, why were they? What do you mean? Because again, these are lifetime commitments. You hear people say it all the time. I'm a X, Y, and Z until I die. But we never think about the gravity of those words. I never questioned why people were leaving. I didn't watch the videos. I didn't read the posts, but I said, okay, well, if that's what God is telling them to do, then okay. But I also can admit there was a part of me that was offended. And I couldn't quite pinpoint it because what did that have to do with me? But there was a part of me that kind of would get a little irritated when I would start to see the rise of this content coming up. It was something where, I just didn't I was ignorant, to be honest. I was very ignorant and offended because of my love, passion, and pride for this organization. Well, why are people leaving it? Why are they telling us? And go do what you want to do. That was essentially it. And I'm not alone in that. I'll fully admit it. Um, and it was something, honestly, I never questioned for myself because I didn't understand. And so around November timeframe, before I decided my 75 soft challenge, I know now in hindsight, but seeds were being planted for me to leave, renounce my membership, and denounce the organization. And looking back, again, the 7-year time frame had hit. 7 years was November 12th, 2024. The last chapter meeting I went to was the beginning of December. Not even 7 days after that chapter meeting, conviction hit me in a way I have never felt before. And the crazy thing is, you don't realize what you're involved in. You don't realize some of the things you've maybe programmed to say, think, or believe until you're separated from it. And so for me, maybe about 3 weeks before I started to feel convicted, I was with a friend and we were watching movies, having a good time. And randomly she asked me, what do you feel about people denouncing their organizations? And I said, people have to be led by their own convictions. And I thought that was the end of the conversation. And then she asked me about some videos going around from people who had denounced their membership in Delta Sigma Theta, a different organization, which again, I wouldn't know what they're doing. I have nothing to do with that. That's not what I had been a part of. And she had mentioned a Greek goddess on their shield. And out of my mouth, I said, I don't know who that is. I don't serve Greek gods. I serve Alpha Kappa Alpha. And would you believe that hit me like a ton of bricks a few weeks later? Because I did not realize, and I really honestly did not mean it in the sense of serving it above the Lord, but it's stuff like that where it's like, oh, where did that come from? So I'll tell you how it started. Again, last chapter meeting was the beginning of December. I actually had won an award and I felt like I was getting to a point where it's like, wow, I'm really growing here. I was an officer in the graduate chapter I was in. I was on several committees. I was volunteering. I was active 24/7, 365. I missed maybe a year within that 7-year time period. But you can also understand why when I tell you this, why I hesitated for weeks, because I was in it, and all in here. But I was driving to work one day and I listened to podcasts. I was commuting to work. It was a long drive, about an hour drive. And there was a podcast episode that came up in the queue, and it was the Keep It Positive Sweetie podcast with Crystal Renee Hazlett, and her guest was Brenda Palmer. I had never heard of this woman before, but the episode had been saved. I meant to listen to it a month prior, didn't even look at the description, but it came up in the queue. And that day it was raining. I was sitting in traffic, so there was time to think. As this episode's going on, the episode was titled A Season of Yes or A Series of Yes. And Brenda Palmer starts to talk about many different things, including yoga and why Christians should not partake in that. And I was like, that's interesting. I will link this in the description box so you can listen to it for yourself. But as she was talking, she went on to say, such and such and such and such, my former line sister. And there was something in me that got irritated. And I was like, oh, she's one of these people. But I said, all right, I'll listen to what she has to say. Because again, I had never taken the time to really hear people out. I just was like, all right, that's their business. That's their life. And the difference in how she spoke, she wasn't yelling. She wasn't condemning anybody. She was not being judgmental. She spoke with truth. And that's the difference. It's how you speak to people, especially when it comes to uncomfortable topics like this. And she started to speak, and she was like, she had been a member for X amount of years, and she was on a live panel of some sort, and there was a woman sharing her testimony of denouncing, and it irritated her. And she ended up talking to her. Apparently, they had been in the same organization. She shared a podcast that she listened to, and Brenda said she left immediately. But what she explained really stuck with me, because when you become a member of these organizations, we see these things on TV. We see the you could call it dramatization, or you could call it reality, because there is a reality for people out there who are harmed. That was not my experience, but there are people who have been harmed in these processes. You see that on TV. What you don't see are these initiation processes, which are secret. And why is that? Why is it that you have to hide what you do to join an organization that uplifts your community? Why is it that you have to hide, and let's call it what it is, the rituals that you partake in? And I'll admit, I didn't remember majority of what was done. I didn't. You go into a room, somebody said, the membership chairs and the president repeat certain things, you repeat it back. You're taking oaths at an altar. And that it's something you have to sit with, because it's like you don't realize. And again, for me, I was a teenager, but even still, there are graduate chapters. There are people who are adults doing this, but I don't think people are realizing what they're getting themselves into when you're making these oaths, these covenants with these organizations and everything attached to it. You're coming into agreement with stuff that you don't realize. And that's the issue. The issue is not the backpacks you gave away. The issue is not the food you gave away. The issue is not the friendships. The issue is not about money that you're fundraising. The issue is not who you're helping. And I think oftentimes people stay in bondage because they're looking at the great things that are happening. Yes, they are great. I'll admit that. But they're negating the darkness that's underlying. And as she was talking, she mentioned, and again, different organization, they probably said different things, but it's still very similar. We came to an altar and we made an agreement with this organization, and in some cases, probably all of them. Again, I don't know all of what the rest of them do, but Greek gods and goddesses that are attached to them. And that was something even months after I left, I did not realize. And I also want to point out, this is not just a Black Greek letter organization issue. It's all of them, because they're all doing the same thing. It's not just the Black ones. It's not just the white ones. Masons, Eastern Stars, any organization that has you participating in these ritualistic processes, it goes against God's word. And here's how I discovered that. So I listened to this podcast, and she's sharing different things from the initiation ritual. She didn't go through the whole deep dive of it, but she said enough to really scare me straight, where one thing she said that still sticks with me to this day is, when you go to an altar without a sacrifice, you are the sacrifice. Remember I told you about the 75 soft? So at this point, I'm reading the Bible. I've jumped to the beginning. I'm going through Genesis. I'm in Exodus at this point. And it was the conviction. The words were jumping off of the page. Altar, sacrifice, idol. I swear it was on every single page. I could not escape it. And you're probably wondering, okay, Courtney, well, what did you do with that information? I was disobedient. And anybody who has been disobedient for anything, you can probably attest to how painful that feels. So the first day I heard the podcast, I was shook. Couldn't stop thinking about it. The second day, I was shook. The third day, I had started to feel physically kind of a little ill. And it was beyond anxiety at that point. It was truly conviction. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm making this up. I don't know. But it was at that point, in life, I always heard people say they hear God. They hear the voice of God. God talks to them. And because I was immature in my walk, I at least to my recollection, I don't think I ever heard him. But because it was so urgent, God was tugging at me so urgently. There were days where I knew my thoughts were not my own, which his word says. His thoughts are not our thoughts, his ways are not our ways. And there were moments, I remember it was around the third or fourth day, where I thought to myself, and again, I wasn't thinking like I was talking to God. I'm just in my mind, and I'm like, God, if it's so bad, if this is so bad, why do I have to leave? What about everybody else? And I heard clear as day back, a response back. I did not tell them, I told you. Which humbled me. But it also was something where I was like, okay, I have to do this. I can't worry about other people. And I later learned this is an assignment. It is. And it didn't matter what everybody else was doing. Not saying what they do does not matter, but in that moment, God was calling me. The phone was ringing for me. And I remember I would just have these moments where I was like, man, God, this is a really permanent decision. And he would remind me that so is your salvation. And that you have to sit with it, because we have choices. And the wages of sin is death. Could be physical, definitely spiritual. Your dreams, your goals, blessings, it separates us from God. And in those days and weeks that I spent battling, I have never felt more separate from the Lord. Not because he left me, because he didn't. He was right there with me the whole time, but I walked away because I was in denial. I was offended. I was confused. So again, during this time, I'm reading the word like I've never read it before. And I'll be honest, my flesh, I was literally at war between my flesh and my spirit, because my flesh did not want to read. I was like, that's the last thing I want to do. I tried reading books, watching TV, but it would not go away. Again, at this time, I'm reading Exodus. This is my first time ever fully reading this book. Moses has this assignment to free the Israelites from Egypt, and Pharaoh would not let them go, and God hardened his heart. And I kid you not, this Apple Watch I'm wearing, there were days where my heart rate was so abnormal. And also, I was working out. I was consistently in the gym, so I know what a normal heart rate is looking like. There were days where my resting heart rate was not even 60 beats a minute. It could be 50. One time it was 43, and I was sitting up awake. God literally hardened my heart because I would not let it go. That's terrifying. It was just reading Exodus. I was like, oh, goodness gracious. When they got to the part where Moses comes down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments on the tablets, and he saw the Israelites partying, dancing, and praising a golden cow, it was like, oh, this is you. This is you. You did that too. You did that too. It numbs you on it. It's pretty scary to think about that. And again, mind you, I'm active in this organization. I'm still going to meetings. I'm in such denial. I'm still answering emails. I joined another committee. I attended a virtual chapter meeting, but at that point, it was like the veil had been lifted, where I was at one point scared. I was like, oh, I don't think I can go. There was supposed to be an in-person chapter meeting in January. It ended up being virtual. And I'm glad, because at that point I started to think about the hymn, and I was like, I can't sing this. I literally cannot sing this song. This doesn't feel right. I can't say this pledge anymore, Because once I started to dissect the words, and in the pledge, it says, quote, "We pledge our hearts, our minds, our strength." That is a direct contradiction from the word of God that says to love God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul. And when that clicked for me, I was like, oh, this is deeper than I thought. It wasn't just the rituals. It was, I can't say these things. I can't embody these things anymore. This is wrong. It was completely wrong. I struggled. You're also probably wondering, did you tell people? No, I didn't. I had briefly mentioned it to my mom, who is not in an organization, never had been, never would have been. That was not her thing. And I mentioned it to a mentor who is in the organization. And when I did mention it to my mentor, who was in the faith, who was a believer of God, I was like, man, like, you've been in this for these years. You're seeing all this stuff. You're also involved in church. What's going on here? Is this idolatry? And she didn't see it the way I saw it. And all I can do is pray for her and other people that they see it and they answer the call when it's time. Which also goes back to the fact that I could not be affirmed by other people, because if they didn't see it, that wasn't an excuse for me to stay. It's just not their time. The heart palpitations, it was literally a sign of my disobedience. I wrestled for 40 days exactly. I didn't realize this until hindsight. Like when I finally made that decision and was like, hey, God, you win, white flag, I'm out of here. I can't do this anymore. It had been 40 days. Again, still serving in the graduate chapter, still going to work in graduate school with friends, with family. But I was almost just showing up, but mentally I was in a different place. Mentally, I would sit and be like, man, how do you know what you're supposed to do and you don't do it? And this is in the word as well. It's literally the war, the friction that we're feeling between our flesh and our spirits. It's something we're dealing with on a daily basis. Again, this is just one example. We're all probably going through something and need to let stuff go. But I share this to bring awareness, and I'll also include some other resources in the description box, because I too was a person who was committed. I'll be here forever. But what does that really mean? I was committed. I did not understand. And I think a lot of times people are blinded by offense. They're blinded by what they don't know. Sometimes they do know. I've had conversations in the last 6 months with people, men and women, different organizations, same organizations. Some of them who understand, and they're like, you know what? Yeah, they saw it too, but they have not left. Only God can handle that with them. That's their journey and their walk. But there are people who are fully aware. I was not aware. There are people who are not aware by choice. I was willfully ignorant. They're probably doing the same thing. There are older people who don't even know that this is a thing. But again, our testimonies are not about us. They're for other people. And I remember right around the time I got ready to make my decision, I talked to a really good friend of mine who is a member, one of my best friends. And she said, if the Lord is convicting you, it's not going to stop. And I respect her for that, because she could have coddled me. She could have made it be anything. But it was one of those things where I was like, wow, I really can't wait on other people. Like when God tells you to do something, he's talking to you. It's not about, well, so-and-so didn't, or so-and-so, or, and again, especially with something like this that people have been coming out about for years and years and years and years, the information is out there. It's out there. People have written books. They've done videos like this. There are whole ministries dedicated to it. The information is there. It's what you do with it. But in that moment, like I said, it was about me. I couldn't be worried about if other people hadn't seen it yet, hadn't thought about it, or it hadn't clicked for them yet. But around the time I made my decision, I had also signed up to volunteer on MLK Day. I did. Again, disobedient. I was in denial. I had signed up. I was ready to roll. And a couple of days beforehand, I checked the roster. My name was not there. And it's not a coincidence, not an accident. It was the Lord. Because I had signed up. I had the confirmation email and everything. But when I looked, my name was not on that list. And I said, okay, well, I'm not going. All right. Now, I'm not going to go. No problem. And the day before I made my decision, it was a Sunday, the Sunday going into Martin Luther King Day. I was reading a Bible devotional. Again, still reading the book of Exodus. I'm in the New Testament. I'm jumping all around the Bible at this point because I was like, okay, even though I kind of don't want to read it, but I'm afraid of what I'm going to see, and this is really convicting, I just kept reading. I kept reading because even if my flesh was against it, it was hitting here. It was hitting here. And that night before I made my decision, I was reading a Bible devotional about trusting God. And there was a picture that they talked about in the devotional of a little girl holding a teddy bear. And it's a little tiny teddy bear. And across from her is Jesus. And she's saying, but I love it. And he tells her with this ginormous teddy bear behind his back, he says, I have something better for you. And I tell you, that wrecked me. It wrecked me because I could not see beyond that moment. I could not see beyond that. And I didn't think I had an identity issue. Again, I'll be the first to admit it, put a finger down, because whether people realize it or not, it is part of your identity, especially when you've been doing this for years and years and years and years and years. And yes, I had a life outside of it and many other things, but a part of that friction was, oh, what's next? What is going to happen? What is going to happen next? Who am I? What is happening? And when I saw that, it literally wrecked me, where I was like, okay, I don't think I have another choice. But I think we also have to recognize, like, it's moments like this. You still have your free will. But what are you doing with it? Can God trust you to do what he told you to do, to make the decision, to take the step, to let go, to move on? He really can't force you. You'll get very uncomfortable. But you have a decision to make. And one of the things I kept hearing during my 40 days of wrestling was you can't do both. You can't do both. And there were nights I prayed where I was like, God, I'm sorry. I did not realize what I said, what I accepted, what I came in agreement to, but can I please still be a member? There were nights where I said, Lord, I'm sorry. I won't do it again. But then I had to think about it. Well, if I stay in this chapter and bring in new members, that blood is on my hands because I'm complicit. And I was like, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. Knowing what I know, knowing the truth, knowing that you can't do it. And it wasn't a matter of being a general member either. I'm still paying money and giving money to it. You could be inactive, but you're still in covenant. You may not have paid a due, been to a meeting, sang a hymn, said a pledge, worn a shirt in years, but if you're still in covenant. And I had to sit with that too, because I bargained with the Lord. That Sunday night, I saw that devotional. I was like, okay, Lord, all right, cool. All right, I'll do it. I went to sleep that night, woke up, and I started bargaining. And I was like, God, well, can we wait till the end of the year? Can I get some time? Maybe I'll just be a general member. Maybe I'll step down from a committee. I was throwing out plenty of options. And I was like, God, are you sure? Are you sure you still want me to denounce? And the moment I said that, my phone rang. Literally, my actual cell phone rang. And it was the president of the chapter I was in. I've known this woman since I was a teenager. Love and respect her dearly, but I could not answer the phone in that moment. It was like I froze. And I was like, okay, God, all right. And I was wrecked, honestly. But I knew at that point, I was like, okay, I'm out of here. I can't do this. I can't. Literally, as the word says, you can't serve two masters. And just, my spirit had been so grieved because, again, it's not about the community service. It's not about the sisterhood. It's not about the friendship. It's not about the scholarship, the service. It's none of the brotherhood. It's none of these things. It's what we've come into agreement with. It's the doors we have opened and allowed the enemy to access us because we don't know any better. And I had a conversation with a male friend, a brother in Christ, a couple of months after I denounced, and I had shared it on Instagram. I reposted something, and the woman had shared the reasons why she did the same thing. I responded, and all I said was a few words. I'm glad I gave God my yes. And he was one of the few people that commented. And when I talked to him, and I was like, man, like, how does this happen? He's also an organization. I'm like, how does this happen? How do we not know? How do we not realize how severe this is? And when he said it, I was like, oh, that makes sense. He was like, because it's deceptive. It's deceptive. The come on in, the initiation, the indoctrination, the things you're saying, which I've gone back and looked. These things are on the internet. I will post it in the description box. But I found the rituals, which again, they don't give them to you. They don't say, hey, you remember now, congrats, take the book with you. Because then you would read it. Then you would look into it. Then you would decipher and you would understand what you did. Let's just call it what it is. But they are on the internet. And I saw these things in college, looking, matter of fact. I just didn't understand, didn't really read too much into it. But somebody out there somewhere has put a bunch of organizations' initiation rituals on the internet. And when I looked at it, there were Bible verses, which does not mean just because the Bible was there and just because the verses were said does not mean God graced that opportunity. That's it. It doesn't. It's not an excuse. It's not an excuse. But when I went back and read and I started to look at stuff and looking at some of these phrases and things that were said, again, I don't remember these 7+ years ago, I was like, what is any of this? What is this? What is this? What exactly is this? And that's why it's demonic. Because it's deceptive. And I know that may be hard to hear. But as children of God, we are called to be a light and to shine boldly and unapologetically and to bring light where there is darkness. And let me be clear. I'm not calling the people dark. I'm not calling the people dark. It's not what I'm saying. But this institution, this entity, it is dark. And I think once we accept that and recognize it, we move forward. There's a verse in the Bible that says to come out from among them and be ye separate. As children of God, we are called to be set apart. And that means there are a lot of things in this world we have to let go of and we have to recognize them for what they are. Especially in America, where sororities, fraternities, secret societies are literally American culture. Black, white, Latino, Asian, it don't matter. It doesn't matter. I've had this conversation with friends who are never have been in these organizations. Some of which who had the same realizations like, oh, what's happening here? And so, again, I'll be clear. I'm not saying this to condemn anybody. I'm not saying this to force anybody. I'm not saying this to judge at all because, again, hey, hello, I was there. 7 years. 7 years on the fast track to forever. I was there. And that's why I'm sharing this, because I was in your shoes. The morning I made the decision, I told my best friend, and she said, one of my best friends, and she said, perhaps you're in this position to help people who are on the fence. And I think, again, it's been 6 months for me now since I've done this. And I've shared it in conversations. I shared it with the chapter that I left. Hundreds of people are in it. I've shared it on my Facebook page. I've shared it on Instagram. But I've never verbally shared this to this extent. And I've had many conversations recently, dreams even, where I was told to do this. Because people can read your words. And there are many people who have wrote blogs, books, many sorts of things. But it's the conviction when you speak. And one book of the Bible that I have sat with many times this year, read it multiple times, is the book of Esther. And there's a part in Esther where her cousin tells her, because she was Jewish, she had not shared that she was Jewish. She was married to the king, and one of the king's people was plotting to kill all of the Jews. And her cousin said, perhaps you are in this situation for such a time as this. And if you are silent, they will get their deliverance from somewhere else. And that is why we share testimonies. Because your silence is a disservice to so many other people. And although, again, like I said, I've shared this on one-on-one, I've had conversations with strangers, conversations with friends, conversations with many other people. My mother, even though my mom didn't even when I finally told my mom, she was a little confused. Not that, because she just didn't understand the level of it, but she was proud of me for my obedience. And she's told people, plenty of people, in the grocery store, at church, anywhere. And we've since had conversations after. My dad and I, we've had conversations. Family members, we've had conversations. And that helps people. It helps people. And it would be a disservice and it would be selfish if I sat here and didn't do this. And I definitely had felt conviction to do it earlier, months ago. And I thought, I'll just keep having conversations with people. But is this not a conversation? And so in the 6 months since I've renounced my membership, meaning I separated, I don't hold up the pinky. I don't wear the colors together with the shield. I don't carry my paraphernalia. All of that's gone. And I have denounced the organization and fraternity and sorority life, meaning publicly calling it out and expressing that I don't agree with it and the stuff that's wrong. It has taught me a lot about surrender. And there were many other things. God was not through with me. With the moment I waved the white flag and left AKA, he wasn't done with me yet. There have been many things he's been working on in my heart and in my life. My language, my behaviors, things I wear, things I say, alcohol consumption, many things, many, many, many things. And when I say it taught me surrender and how it strengthened my walk with the Lord, again, I had been following God, again, not to the best of my ability, and I'm aware of that. I knew I had some lukewarm tendencies, and it wasn't just because of the organization. But for God to swoop in and say, hey, I need you to put this down. I need you to go. It taught me to trust him because I did not know what next was going to look like. Because it wasn't just, I'm stepping away, nobody knows. No, you're going to tell people. And not compromise with that either. It was knowing that, again, for me, I had been in denial, doing work. I had been sending emails, doing work for the organization up until the moment I said I was out. And so it went from 1 minute I'm here all in to the next minute telling them I'm following the Lord in a new direction in my life and this can't go with me. Please remove me from this chapter, sending a letter to the corporate office and saying, hey, I'm done with this. I didn't know what that was going to look like. And again, I'm not the first person to denounce an organization. I'm not going to be the last one. I'm not the first person to publicly make something like this. And when there's been backlash, I've seen it happen with people, strangers. I have not experienced that to my face, and I thank God for his mercy and shielding me from that. But even if it does come, I am not here to serve people. I'm not. I'm here to serve the Lord. And if that means people are offended or upset or angry, then so be it. Because at the end of this life, when it's over, I have to answer for every word spoken and every word not spoken. And I can live with putting this out there and whatever happens. What I can't live with is knowing you knew what you were supposed to do and you didn't do it. Because at the end of the day, this yes is the key to somebody else's breakthrough. It's the key to somebody else's salvation. It's the key to somebody else's deliverance. So why would I sit and not do anything? And for some of you watching this, you may be on the fence. The seed may have already been planted. This is the water. Ultimately, God will bring it to harvest. But get off of the fence. Just get off the fence. I know it's hard. I know it's uncertain. But there are so many examples in the Bible where God never left his people. Even when they acted up, he never left their side. When Moses had to deliver the Israelites, God said, I will be with you. When Jesus was on the cross, he was with him. He's with you. And I hope that really touches people, because we run from God all the time, but he never leaves us. And I think that's been one of my biggest lessons this year since making that decision and choosing to follow the Lord and live a surrendered life, and knowing that he hasn't left me and he's not going to leave you. But he wants more for you. He wants better for you. He wants to free you from the things that you're ashamed of, from the things that you struggle with. And for some of y'all, it may not be an organization. It could be drugs. It could be alcohol. It could be sex. It could be other idols in your life. Idols aren't just statues. It's anything we put before the Lord, anything that gets in the way of our obedience and our relationship with the Lord. Maybe he's telling you to do something. You may need to start a business. You may need to start a ministry. You may need to accept the call to ministry, whatever that may be. But I hope and I pray that when the phone rings, you answer. And I've learned as well, even slow obedience is disobedience. Because if I had just given God that yes and left that day when I heard the podcast, I would have spared myself the physical effects of my disobedience. I would have been spared from the questioning, the wondering, the going back and forth, and living in that place of I don't know what to do. I would have spared myself from all of that if I had just made that decision right then and there. But I also recognize that the time was not in vain. Those 40 days, and again, I did not realize that until after the fact. I looked at a calendar maybe a couple weeks later, and I was like, wait a minute, how much time had passed? And then I looked at some examples of what 40 days. There are other people who had some 40-day journeys in the Bible, so I know it's not a coincidence. I know it's easier said than done. But when you let go and trust the Lord, he'll replace it with something better. He'll replace it with many things. He will heal the broken parts of you. He will patch you up and make you new. He makes all things new. And know that you're not alone. This is just one example of surrender and obedience and faith, but you are not alone. Um, I firmly recognize at this point that God made an example out of me because, again, anybody who knows me in real life, whether college or in the years after, they knew that I was active. I was doing this. I was here for the right reasons. I wasn't here for show. And so for me to step forward and say, I'm not a part of this anymore, I'm trusting the Lord and I'm moving forward, it was a shock. But I know sometimes God uses certain people to get certain things across. And so if you're the target audience for this, I pray you take heed and you follow. Because your life does depend on it. Your yes is the key to somebody else's breakthrough, to somebody else's journey. And God is with you. Like I said, there are some resources I'm going to put in the description box because I could sit here and talk for 24 hours, but I'm not going to remember everything. And I think some people, I'm a visual learner, so I like to sit and read. And I think there are some things that people would benefit from reading, that who have done some really, really, really deep dives on this. Some Bible verses that have helped me in my own understanding, some ebooks that I've read since then. But yeah, I pray this blesses you, whoever you are on the other side of this. And I thank you for listening, because it's tough conversations and tough topics like these that we have to address. It's not always going to be comfortable. It's not always going to be comfortable, but just say yes and watch what God will do, and know that He is with you every step of the way, and He loves you, and I love you too. And be encouraged. Thanks for listening.